we're going to be talking about some pre-draft moves to make, things you want to do before the NFL draft, before your rookie draft. So, Zach, let's just kick it off. What is the first move that you are making?
Yeah, so look, as we get into this NFL draft season, I think as of recording this, Mike, we are 1 month away from the NFL draft as of today.
You are
I
correct.
am moving off running backs that are in their last year of their rookie deal or are just in a spot where it looks like their production is going to be replaced. And three names come to mind right away. I'm sure there's others. No, this isn't only exclusive to these three, but these are the examples that I'm giving you. I'm talking about Isaiah Pacheco, Brian Robinson, and DeAndre Swift. For Isaiah Pacheco and Brian Robinson, they both fall into the category of this is the last year of their rookie deal. I think B-Rob was a day two guy. Pacheco was obviously the seventh round pick. Both those teams have had success with those players, but they're not anything to write home about. They're nice NFL players and they're decent fantasy starters if they're getting the rock. But both of those teams are in positions to add another running back and a significant running back. Like I don't think the Chiefs are replacing Pacheco with the seventh round pick. Then I'd still want Pacheco. But a lot of mock drafts I see and just things that make sense. You see some good names going to the Chiefs, to the Commanders, and even to the Bears, obviously with Ashton Genty being mocked to oblivion to either the Raiders or the Bears. So those are three running backs that I'm just trying to capitalize on whatever value I can prior to the NFL draft. With DeAndre Swift, you may say, hey, they just signed him to a 3-year, $24 million contract. Well, we're 1 year through that. And I don't think DeAndre Swift just fades into irrelevancy this season. But I do think if they go with Ashton Genty or even Amari Hampton, that he's the B or the second running back in that pecking order. And if you look at his contract, next year it is only $1.3 million in dead money to move off, which means it's very easy to move off DeAndre Swift next season. As I said, Pacheco and Brian Robinson, they don't have contracts beyond 2025. They are both in their fourth year of their rookie deal. And, a team could look to replace them next year with a running back in what is a very, very good running back class. So really, I'm just trying to maximize on my value with those players here. I don't think you're at a point where, maybe you could parlay them into a first round pick if you attach them to a second round pick. I think people have wisened up to what I'm saying and realize that those guys may be replaced by their respective teams. But there's still some value to be had. You might be able to get a second-round pick in this year's draft or a second-round pick in next year's draft. I would even look at a second-round pick in 2027, which is a very, very, very good draft on paper as of right now. Some names that I would be looking to get, you'll notice a theme here because this is something I'm going to talk about later, Mike, is some veteran point scorers. Can I maybe trade for a Christian Kirk? Can I maybe trade for a Cortland Sutton? Those are guys that are 28, 29 years old that fantasy players deem them dead at this point in the season. And I'm going to talk about that later. A couple of other names, Bretton Strange, Jonnu Smith, two tight ends that, one was, I think, a top 5 tight end in fantasy football last year and is still under contract with the Miami Dolphins. Bretton Strange stepping into a position where the Jaguars vacated the Evan Ingram targets in that offense. And Bretton Strange, when he stepped in last year, he looked pretty solid. That doesn't mean that their teams don't draft a tight end. I just don't think they draft Tyler Warren or Colston Loveland, who are the two big names in this draft. So can I turn a running back into a potential starting tight end with a Bretton Strange or a Jonnu Smith? So again, just trying to get ahead of the curve here, maximizing my value on these running backs before they potentially get replaced in the NFL draft. And that's something you should be trying to do every year, Mike, is what is the strength of the draft? Oh, it's running backs. Okay, so maybe I need to get some of these running backs off my roster before they lose potential value in the NFL draft. That's something that you can plug and play with quarterbacks, wide receivers, tight ends, whatever it may be, every single year.
And then just to let you know, you were correct about Jonnu Smith. He was actually the tight end 4 on the season in a PPR format, 13.1 fantasy points per game. That's ahead of notable tight ends such as Travis Kelce, Mark Andrews, Sam Laporta. So, yeah, I like what you're
still seemingly very cheap to acquire. I don't know why he's still under contract with the Dolphins. They peppered him with work last year. I don't see them drafting, one of those two tight ends that would overtake Jonnu Smith in the offense this year. So it's still a very, very affordable option out there on your fantasy rosters.
I like it. My first move to make is I'm trading for Minnesota Vikings quarterback JJ McCarthy. If I'm not a competitive team, um, and I feel like he's a really good example of a tear down quarterback. If you're looking to get some additional draft capital, you just want to kind of make some moves. Sam Darnold's gone. He's now with the Seattle Seahawks. Daniel Jones is gone as well. He is with the Indianapolis Colts. Who knows how things are going to shake out there. Rodgers will not be a thing there. Aaron Rodgers, I believe he's in for a visit. The Vikings, they let him go without a contract. And the Vikings have also had callers about J.J. McCarthy, I believe, most notably from the Tennessee Titans. My information is correct. But they've shunned all those offers, Zach. They said, no, we're comfortable. We're moving forward with J.J. McCarthy. He was a 24 first-round pick. And look, we don't have any stats to go off of with J.J. McCarthy. All I have for you is a senior year at Michigan. It was a good season. Just keeping in mind when you hear these stats, Michigan was a run-first team. Okay, 240 out of 333, and that's a 72.1% completion percentage, Zach. For 2,991 yards, 22 touchdowns to only 4 picks, and he did run the ball. 57 carries, 340 times for 3 touchdowns, albeit with 3 fumbles. Keeping in mind, you may say, hey, Mike, that doesn't seem like a lot of rushing yards. College football, they do take away yardage for sacks. Okay, so just keep that in mind. He's player 40 on keep trade cut. Quarterback 14, okay, which I do feel like maybe quarterback 14 might be just a little too high for a guy who hasn't played yet. It's a lot of foreshadowing, but still. What does it cost to tear down to JJ McCarthy? I pulled some trades from Fantasy Calc, and I know a lot of people say, hey, we pick and choose our trades. Look, a lot of the trades on there have like 13 or 14 moving pieces, and I try to just find the most simple trades that I can for you guys. Okay, just keep that in mind. So here's one: CJ Stroud for JJ McCarthy in a 25 second. So especially if that's a high second, you could end up getting a nice running back to pair with that as well. Straight up, you have good wide receiver room. You could do Jalen Waddle for JJ McCarthy, crossing positions there. Here's another one. We had a sell who was a sell last week from Nate and a sell this week from Zack. You could do Ricky Pearsall and Brian Robinson for JJ McCarthy. So a couple trades I found there to go ahead and get JJ McCarthy on your roster. Now, Zack, we were talking before, and you said that you like trading for JJ McCarthy, even if you're a competitive team. I will say I do not disagree with that, with the caveat being that he is not my quarterback 2 going into the season. He's my quarterback 3 if it's a competitive team. I don't want him to be my 2 yet. I want some better, consistency. Well, obviously he doesn't have any consistency because he hasn't played yet, but you understand.
I was in a situation last year. I had a team and I won the championship in that league. I had Jalen Hurts, Brock Purdy, and Sam Darnold, and I still traded for JJ McCarthy, and now I have 4 quarterbacks. That's the kind of situation I'm talking about, where he's not. Yeah, exactly. He's not one of my starting quarterbacks, but he's my quarterback 3, and I'll even do what I'm gonna tell you next, Mike, as I'm gonna lead into my next move to make.
Do it.
Which is talking about acquiring cheap, backup, relevant handcuff quarterbacks. That doesn't mean, last year if you had Tua, you go get Skylar Thompson. No. That's not what I'm talking about, okay? What I'm looking for here, Mike, is relevant quarterbacks, handcuffs, backups, all those in potentially offensive-friendly systems. The last few years, Mike, in the NFL, we've seen a rise in these like renaissance quarterbacks that get do-overs in new systems, right? Geno Smith, Baker Mayfield, Sam Darnold have each had their comeuppance in each of the last 3 seasons. Like each of those guys, I think one was 2022, one was 2023, one was 2024, had a renaissance season. Well, who will that apply to, Mike, in 2025, potentially? To a higher degree, really what I'm trying to do here is buy low on a quarterback that'll gain value at some point this season or the next, that I'll turn into either a starting quarterback for me in the future or something that I can trade. Like in that league I just told you, Sam Darnold was my Brock Purdy handcuff. And then he turned into a starting quarterback, So that's what I'm trying to do here. Some names the 2 names to me that really just pop off in terms of that handcuff quarterback thing is Mac Jones and Daniel Jones, the Jones brothers, what we'll call them on this show. Mac Jones with the 49ers now, Kyle Shanahan. Love that opportunity for him to sit there for a year or 2, learn, grow, get comfortable with the system, and then maybe spread your wings and fly. Who knows? Daniel Jones, I would have preferred that he stayed in Minnesota for another year with Kevin O'Connell. But Shane Steichen is another good system to be in. That's a quarterback friendly system, which is all the more reason why you should be worried about Anthony Richardson. To a lesser degree here, Mike, what I'm trying to do is target some other quarterbacks. A good one will be whoever the hell is the backup in Minnesota. Like, I will be targeting that person for sure, especially if I have JJ McCarthy. If I have Trevor Lawrence, I'm trying to get Nick Mullins. It should not be that expensive. He might even be a free agent. But Nick Mullins has been fantasy relevant whenever he's been given the opportunity to start. Just look a couple years ago when he was starting for the Vikings, when they were going through all those injuries and Josh Dobbs got an opportunity. Nick Mullins was decent, Yeah. Another quarterback that I know right now, it might be a little too expensive because just on paper, he's the only quarterback there other than Tommy DeVito, is Jameis Winston. Jameis Winston, if he ever gets an opportunity to start, is fantasy relevant. He is.
Zach, I will say this. As of this recording, again, March 24th, Jameis Winston is player 192 on Keep Trade Cut. He's quarterback 32.
Right. And look, like, if
I
had somebody offer me a fourth for Jameis Winston, and I was like, I'm not doing that just because he might be it might be a little bit harder to get that done. But this can apply to 2, 3, 4 weeks down the line. And even after the draft, this can apply to. But I am trying to get them now because people aren't worried about filling out their lineups right now. And they're not worried about point scores. They're all focused on the draft. So if I can, in our Rewinders League, Mike, I got Mac Jones for a 5th round pick.
Beautiful.
Yeah. I'm like, this is a no-brainer.
People
and I have Brock Purdy. I have Brock Purdy in that league too, by the way.
Here's the thing. People are going to say, why would I want a backup quarterback? Sam Darnold just signed a 3-year, $100 million contract with the Seattle Seahawks. So, these guys that were picks and then move around, they always get another chance if they were a first-round pick, which Mac Jones was.
Mike, let me look up a stat here if you can just pause it for a second.
Yeah, and also, but I will say while you're doing that, you said whoever the backup quarterback in Minnesota is, that's Brett Ripon.
Oh, God, no.
Right now. So I think the Vikings will probably take a developmental guy to be the 3 and then eventually replace Ripon like a Tyler Shuck or something, a guy of that ilk, to just come in there and be better than Brett Ripon.
So look, you asked the question, well, why would I want a backup quarterback, right? Well, let's look at week 17, which is your fantasy championship weeks.
Yes.
Let's look at some top 24 quarterbacks, okay, which is a quarterback 2. All right. Drew Lock was quarterback 3 last year on week 17.
Okay. Yeah.
Tyler Huntley was quarterback 11 last year. Aiden O'Connell was quarterback 16 last year. Mac Jones was quarterback 18 last year. Kenny Pickett was quarterback 20 last year. So, and I know that this applies to 2023 because I remember that. That was the year where we had so many quarterback injuries. It was like Joe Burrow was out. There was so many quarterbacks that were hurt in 2023.
Jake Browning.
Yeah, exactly. So for a 5th round pick or a 4th round pick, there was another league where I got Mac Jones. I traded Mac Jones and a 26th 4th for, and I gave up a 26th 3rd. And I was like, look, I'm expecting to be competitive. That's a late 3. This could be an early to mid. I'm not worried about 5 to 6 spots. Everyone's just so focused on that number 3 in front of the draft pick as opposed to the number 4. It's in reality, it's a 5, 6, maybe 7, 8 spot fall. So to me, I'm just trying to secure my quarterbacks if they are in good systems and good offenses. We listed out the names already, but I'm trying to find that quarterback renaissance. I'm trying to find the guy who is going to get the opportunity. Let me tell you, Mike, as soon as Daniel Jones was released from the Giants and signed with the Vikings last year, I was trying to buy Daniel Jones because it was so cheap. And what's the worst that happened? You waste a 4th round pick. Trust me, people who had Daniel Jones on their roster would have loved to have gotten rid of him for a 4th round pick at that point. So, Mike, it might be a little bit harder to get Daniel Jones now than it was 3, 4, 5 months ago, just because the contract is not a backup quarterback contract. It's 1 year, $14 million.
Yeah.
That's a kind of a show me contract. The contract Jameis got is a backup quarterback contract. 2 years. I think it was $4 million a year with the potential of 16 with incentives. That's a backup quarterback contract. When you give a quarterback 1 for 15, that's hey, we're going to give you every opportunity to win this starting job and see what you got. So, I'm just trying to secure myself with some of these backups, these handcuff quarterbacks, or like I said, as I called them, the Renaissance quarterbacks. Who's that going to be in 2025, Mike?
It's funny because you were talking about what's giving up a 4th round pick in the grand scheme of things. Because one of the things I like to do, Zach, is the move I make is shedding the bottom end of my roster to get 3rd, 4th, or 5th round picks so that you can make moves like that, be it during the draft or in the season. And look, you eventually have to make room on your roster. And there's always those bottom feeders on your roster that you kind of hope out for. Guys we liked a little bit, we had hopes. But when push comes to shove, Zach, you do not put them in your starting lineup. You try to trade for somebody, you're scouring the waiver wire because you don't trust these guys. So what good are these guys? Let them bottom feed on somebody else's roster and get some draft capital for them. There's nothing wrong with that. And look, load up on picks. Okay? Because eventually one of these guys, they will pan out. Late round picks, you're going to hit on a few here and there. But the thing that I like about this is it gives you the ability to take chances in the season, as Zach alluded to, getting Mac Jones for a 5th, spending a 4th on Daniel Jones, just in case that somebody gets hurt. You have life insurance for a reason. Grab some dynasty insurance while you're at it. And there's a lot of times you can move around in the draft. Take, for example, you're in a 12-team league, and there's a guy you really want, and the guy's on the clock at the 311. He's just lagging. He's looking, I don't know who to draft. Maybe he doesn't prepare as much as you do. Maybe he doesn't listen to the Dynasty Rewind. I don't know. You could be like, hey, man, I want this pick. Would you take this? You throw a couple 4ths at him, maybe some fab, maybe a bottom feeder, and boom, you got your guy at the 311. And I'll give you a good solid example. Okay, if you have a lot of picks, a few years ago, Adam Thielen, when he went and joined the Panthers, you could have had him for a 4th round pick. A few months later, he's balling out. You could have sold him for a 2nd or a 3rd. Okay, so you're already, or you could have started him and gotten points off of him too, whatever you want to do. But the fact of the matter is, more picks, more value, more chances to get good players on your roster. It's going to take some finagling for you to do, and it's going to take you to decide who the bottom feeders on your roster are. But still, clear them out, get those picks in, and make moves. Zach, what's your next move?
Well, first of all, I love that point because it just coincided with my previous point.
One of my favorite things to do.
Yeah, I love that. Also, Adam Thielen last year, weeks 15 to 17, your fantasy playoffs, wide receiver 18.
It's a solid wide receiver 2 for you and better than scouring the waiver wire at that point in the season.
Absolutely, man. You can't do much better than that. So my last move to make here, Mike, is something that, and Adam Thielen was somebody that I talked about this point last year, is get in while the going is good on cheap veteran point scorers. I call them point scorers because you score points. You score points for your fantasy leagues. Last year, my 2 big players when I did this topic was Jonnu Smith and Adam Thielen, and then to a lesser degree was Darnell Mooney, which I remember telling Bob about Darnell Mooney. I said, look at this landing spot. It's beautiful.
It was a good spot for him.
It was beautiful, and it worked out until Michael Penix came in, and then he just hyper-targeted Drake London.
Yeah.
But this year feels like almost any player around the age of 30. I talked earlier about Cortland Sutton and Christian Kirk. Almost any player around the age of 30 years old is eligible for this criteria, right? The biggest one I've been chasing this offseason and who maybe kind of doesn't fit this criteria as much, but I'm still getting at pretty good prices is Chris Godwin.
Okay.
And it's been much harder since he re-signed with the Bucs for obvious reasons, as it should have been. But I think 29 years old now, coming off a second significant injury. But man, he was so good last year when he was healthy. He was the wide receiver 1. I go ahead, Mike, and look this up while I keep talking. But I bet you Chris Godwin still finished like top 36 wide receivers, even though he didn't play like half the season. But Chris Godwin, somebody I've been chasing this offseason. Another right now is Stephon Diggs. Like, if I'm a contender and I need a cheap, what I believe is going to be a point scorer next year, I'm going to go after Stephon Diggs. Stephon Diggs, for me, has been a throw-in in trades at this point. Like, it doesn't harm me to go out there and try to get him, especially while he's unsigned, which, at some point he's going to sign with a team. and he's going to sign with a team that's a good opportunity for him to kind of show himself out and potentially earn a bigger contract in the offseason of 2026. Go ahead, Mike.
I do have it. So you were slightly incorrect. Chris Godwin
Oh.
finished as wide receiver 53, but he did average 17.2 fantasy points per game. So
yeah, he probably missed like 10 weeks. So.
Yeah, if you do it on fantasy points per game, he was wide receiver 9.
I was gonna say top 10.
Yeah, right tied with Mike Evans, by the way.
Yeah. Beautiful. Well, Mike Evans benefited from Godwin not being there.
Of course. Another 1,000-yard seasons for Mike Evans. Put the man in the Hall of Fame.
Yeah. So really, Mike, you could put a lot of players in this category. A year ago, Mike, you could have put Saquon Barkley in this category. Some people didn't love the landing spot of the Eagles because they were fearful of Jalen Hurts taking touches away from him. Like one that you could put in here for even after the draft is if the Ravens draft a running back. Like, I bet you Derrick Henry's price just plummets.
Sure.
Yeah. So look, you could plug a lot of players into this age group, 28, 29. Running backs, it really starts around 26, 27 years old. Like, during the season last year, it was so hard to go get Joe Mixon.
It was.
It's probably really easy to go get him right now. I don't know what that is. I didn't look up any trades. Just the name that came up to me as I was saying this. I'm sure you can look it up if you want, Mike. But, the point scoring Joe Mixon is out of people's minds. And now people are focused on, well, will they draft a running back? And maybe they do, but I don't think that Joe Mixon just goes away. And he did fade towards the end of the season last year, but it was one of the worst offensive lines in football. It hasn't gotten much better, by the way. But
he's running back 22 on Keep Trade Cut. He finished as running back 17. He averaged 17.2 fantasy points per game.
And he had a pretty rough end of the season. He was really bad for you in the fantasy playoffs. But that offensive line was decimated. I think they finished 25th or 26th in win rate for the offensive line and run blocking. It was terrible. And it hasn't got much better. But to me, they're just drafting all offensive line in the NFL draft. So that's I'm not saying go acquire Joe Mixon, but that's the player I'm talking about. The player that right now it's pretty cheap to get. James Conner. I bet you James Conner's not that hard to get right now, and he's going to score you points next season. This is the time of year you want to do it because, Mike, after the draft is when people start focusing on, oh, hey, I need to fill out a lineup now.
Yeah.
My focus shifts towards filling out a lineup. Well, for me, I'm doing that in February and March. I'm saying, what veteran players can I acquire for cheap? I remember 2 years ago, for me, it was Mike Evans. Everybody thought Mike Evans was dead in the water with Baker Mayfield as his quarterback. And last year, Jonnu Smith, Adam Thielen, and Darnell Mooney were my guys, and they won me some championships, man. So go out, get your veteran point scorers, feel good about it because it's not going to be overly expensive for you.
Yeah, I got another guy too, just because of his age, but Zach Ertz, probably another guy you could get relatively cheap compared to his tight end 7 finish last year, 10.4 fantasy points per game. I won a championship thanks in part to Zach Ertz. So yeah, Zach Ertz is another guy that I would put on there. And we're talking about the rookie draft and all that stuff. Another move I'm making is do your own scouting. Obviously, listening to people that you trust, like us, and I'm sure there's other podcasts you listen to as well. That's all well and fine, but I've found that listening to people and then getting my eyes on the player is just 2 completely different things. I want to see, if he's a wide receiver, what does his release look like? Can these guys separate when they're catching the ball? What does it look like if you're running back? How's their contact balance? Do they keep their feet moving? How's their agility? Quarterbacks, does it look like they process well? And, tight ends, you could just kind of mesh in some of the things that what the wide receivers do too. So, plant your flag on these guys. There's going to be guys you like. Maybe it's Omarion Hampton. Maybe it's Devin Neal. Maybe it's Jalen Noel, guys like that, whoever it may be. But then just remember, get eyes on them. But draft capital is important. Landing spot is important as well. And just a reminder to you guys, if you want to check out more in-depth scouting stuff, patreon.com/Dynasty Rewind. Nate and I talking prospects every week up through the draft and most likely past the draft as well. Some of the, I guess you can call them lesser known players that maybe not be getting talked about as much, but Nate and I are covering that over there on our Patreon. And Zach, you have a bonus for us here.
Don't ruin it for the people, Mike. Don't ruin the
I
bonus.
had to lead you into it. I'm sorry.
Real quick, I just want to add two things to what you said.
Go for it.
I have really fallen into believing what you just said, Mike, for several reasons. I have let the combine dictate too much of how I feel about these players as opposed to what they did on film. And the two names that really come to mind are Kyron Williams, who I loved the film, and then the combine, I was just so out. And then Bucky Irving. Bucky Irving's film was phenomenal, and he had a pretty bad combine. And, instead of say, hey, there's an opportunity here for this player to succeed, which, I did feel that conviction with Tyrone Tracy last year. I said, there is an opportunity here for this player. That in your scouting should be what you follow, as opposed to just, hey, oh, he had a bad combine, forget that. That's something that I've been guilty of. And as I'm trying to evolve my dynasty process, trust your scouting, like you said, and don't believe too much in the combine. But yes, thank you for ruining my bonus. I do have a bonus move to make here. I was so excited that you were excited that I did a bonus. I was like, wow, I made the boss happy. My bonus move here, Mike, is trade for Jordan Mason. Trade for Jordan Mason. I don't see how this can't go well for Jordan Mason. Now, look, I was actually surprised that Aaron Jones played 17 games last season, but I think the usage that he got, the Vikings don't want to rely on that so much. And there was also stretches of games where Aaron Jones would get dinged up and he'd be gone for 2-3 quarters or even the rest of the game. You look at his snap percentage on Sleeper, and you can see the games where he missed significant chunks of the game, and they didn't have a reliable backup to give an opportunity or even say, hey, Aaron Jones, take this week off. We have Jordan Mason. No, it was Cam Akers and Tyson Chandler or whatever his name was.
Yeah, Ty Chandler, he's still there. I don't know where Cam Akers is, though.
He's probably a free agent, but he was there. He was there last year. So.
It just says on the R Lads free agents / cap casualties, and that's where Cam Akers is listed.
Yeah. So look, I don't think Aaron Jones is going to get that much work. I think this is an opportunity where Jordan Mason is going to get some decent run. And if Aaron Jones is dinged up, he'll be 31 next year. If he misses time, this is a running back that I feel just as good with the production of Aaron Jones as I do for Jordan Mason. Jordan Mason last year forced a missed tackle on a league-high 37% of his carries. And for this stat, to qualify, you had to have a minimum of 150 carries. So you couldn't just had 30 carries and qualify for the stat. No, you need 150 carries. In weeks 1 through 8, prior to Christian McCaffrey coming back from his injury, Jordan Mason led the entire NFL with 51 missed tackles forced. Okay? What does it cost to get Jordan Mason at this point? I looked on Dynasty Daddy, your website, for recent trades. And I do the same thing, by the way. I limit the amount of assets in the trade because you can, hey, do you want to find a Jordan Mason trade with 8 assets? No, I go 5 or less because I want simplicity in my Jordan Mason trades. I don't want Jordan Mason and 6 players for, the 201. I found a couple of trades here. Jordan Mason for Eric All and a 27th third-round pick.
And I like that the Bengals just re-signed Mike Gesicki. I like that.
Give me that all day long. I'll worry about 27 picks in 2 years. Jordan Mason for Rico Dowdle. This seemed like 2 teams trading for their handcuffs, so to say. I would so much rather have Jordan Mason on that transaction. And then Jordan Mason for 307. Give me Jordan Mason all day long. Yep. None of these, there was no trade on there. Maybe there was one like higher second round pick where I was like, but there was not a lot of trades on Dynasty Daddy that I chose the side opposite of Jordan Mason. So for the prices I'm seeing out there, go out in your leagues, see if you can get him for, mid to late third round pick, or, find a player that maybe complements your opponent's roster that can help, a trade. People think a trade, Mike, has to be beneficial for one side. It can be beneficial for both. So
there's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah. So go out in your leagues, see if you can find a trade that benefits your opponent and gets you Jordan Mason. But I'm telling you, man, I am trying to buy Jordan Mason everywhere I can because eventually I think he's going to get an opportunity to start, whether it be injury, whether it just be, hey, he's possibly past, where Aaron Jones is. I don't know. I can't speak to that just yet. But I don't believe that they traded for Jordan Mason with the intention of him not being the 1B to Aaron Jones. They only have 4 draft picks this year, After the first round, they don't have one until the fourth round. Nobody they draft in the fourth round is overtaking Jordan Mason in terms of his opportunity in that offense. So I'm just so high on that landing spot. And pretty much, just to bookend this, you go trade for JJ McCarthy, you go trade for Jordan Mason. We really believe in the Minnesota Vikings for fantasy football.
Yeah. Look at that. Yeah, I like trading for Jordan Mason there. So, Zach, thank you for joining us this week on the podcast while Nate is on a Natecation. But him and I, we will be back next week. So thank you for watching or listening, everybody. If you want some Dynasty Rewind merch, the link is down below. Don't forget, patreon.com/Dynasty Rewind. We're giving you a week for free. So go ahead, get in there and check it out. But until next time, everybody, for Zach, I'm Mike. Thank you for watching.